Good morning, everyone, again. Hello, hello. Just as we get started, let's just do this a little bit backwards. And a big round of applause for our best friend Ryan and the tech crew. He's hiding behind the wall now. I think we broke 2 cameras and a computer so far this morning. So thank you, University of Phoenix, for having us. Tandra and Angela, thank you so much. And our good friend Sarai Lopez made this possible for us. So thank you, University of Phoenix. Thank you, everyone, for being here. It's always a little risky when we say, we're going to do something in person. And then people say, oh, wait, it's not Zoom? I have to get a shirt? Pants? Yeah, we always have shirts, but the pants. So thank you for being here in person, and this is such an important day for us, YWCA Metro Phoenix, as well as the entire movement. So let me set the stage a little bit. We are going to have, and we'll make sure that we still close on time. I know we started a little late, but we'll squeeze that up at the end. I'm Debbie Esparza, and I'm with YWCA Metropolitan Phoenix. Yeah. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I'm sharing those pronouns with you because it's an important part of how I can share inclusivity and welcoming with folks that want to also share their pronouns. I welcome you to this space, and I welcome you with open arms and an open heart to be your fullest self. And if you'd like to share your pronouns, we welcome that, but also respect your space and your identity. So welcome today. I'd also like to make sure that we pay recognition to the land that we're on. Here in the Metro Phoenix area, we recognize and honor that we work, live, and play on the stolen land of our native nations who inhabited this land before us. In particular, the O'odham, the Acamel O'odham, and the Peeposh people. The injustices that these ancestors and today's community members, the injustice of these ancestors and today's community members still weigh heavy on us. So we do a land acknowledgement, not just simply to say, oh, here's the land acknowledgement. But think about in Phoenix, the intricate waterways, the canals, you know, when you brushed your teeth this morning and the water came on. That's the work of our ancestors, our Native American ancestors here in the Phoenix area, that design of the canals, the labor of making the canals, and now the efficiency of them that makes our life easier. That came at a great cost before us. So sometimes I just think about those kinds of things that we sometimes take for granted, that people before us and the people here now and their future generations are still paying for that. So my acknowledgement and appreciation to our indigenous peoples. I want to also say thank you to a couple of folks that are in the audience. I know all of you are very special, but I want to do a shout out for our colleagues from Southern Arizona. Yay, Tucson. I already gave a little shout out to University of Phoenix. Yay, University of Phoenix. And I want to make a special little shout out to some folks who work on our front line, who for the last 2 years have been cooking 123,000 meals a year to feed seniors in Glendale. Now, this is an example. I'll tell you a little bit more about how we're doing equity work in our organization, but this is an example of self-management, autonomy, and creativity. They said, well, can we go? And I said, sure, you could go. Well, what about all the food? Well, you'll figure it out. And so they have figured out how to do today, right? Seniors are still getting fed, but we've got about 6 or 8 folks from our senior meals program, our frontline folks who don't always get to come to these things because they're busy in the kitchen. And what go ahead, stand up, y'all. This is an example of how we're trying to operationalize equity and creative thinking, self-management, co-direction, or co-creation and collaboration. And the other thing that we try to do, those were some of our culture words. The other thing we try to do at Metro Phoenix is have some fun and have some joy. But then again, like, we're going to be talking about racism today. How do we make that fun? It's not about making racism fun, but it's about the awareness that this work is heavy work. And the self-care that we need to take and the joy that we need to have. I mean, I love coming in and the team that organized this today, they're giggling and carrying on. And we have some heavy stuff to talk about today. So we can't always just take it all like, you know, it's important work, but I appreciate the team that makes this happen and makes it look fun and very smooth. Also, just quickly, I don't want to steal Margaret's thunder, and I'll introduce you to Margaret, but who is YWCA? YWCA has been around nationally for 160 years. We've been in Phoenix for 110 years. And we're still standing, and we're standing strong right now. 3 prongs of how we do our work nationally. There's service delivery, that's things like our meals program and our financial education programs. Then there's training and learning, and this afternoon I'll tell you more about some of our racial equity learnings. And then there's advocacy, and that's where the systems change comes in. That's where the real work happens, and the heavy work, and the stuff that's gonna change folks that are coming next, right? Sometimes I tell the story that I do this work, not just for me, but for the 4 generations of Esparza women. My mom, who's about 84, myself, my 30-year-old niece, and my 4-year-old niece. This work is impacting all of their lives. I can't just stay in the moment. It's bigger than me and them and each of you. So we'll talk about systems today too. What is Stand Against Racism? I'm so pleased. It's a national campaign. Just about every YWCA across the nation this weekend is celebrating and shining the light on Stand Against Racism and the different aspects of how it shows up in their communities. So we're not the only ones. We are the only ones that has our national CEO, though. But it's a national campaign, again, designed to really raise awareness that it's about systems. It's about how we've gotten used to living our lives. Particularly those of us with privilege. I stand before you with plenty of privilege as well, but I'm always unpacking why is this happening and how can I use that privilege to benefit the community. So you're in the middle of the Stand Against Racism campaign. It'll be happening all weekend long. Today we have such a special lineup for you. We have Margaret Mitchell, our new CEO. She's been in the job maybe since January, right? So she hit the ground running. She's formerly the CEO of the Cleveland YWCA, and folks took note. I mean, when I first came into the job, I'm like, what are they doing? How do we do what they're doing? You know, shh, we're gonna take this. But we've learned from each other, and the associations have learned from each other. So I am thrilled that you've accepted our invitation today. But before I give Margaret the floor, I want to introduce a video for one of our partners, Fry's Food Stores and Fry's Foundation and Kroger's. Pam is here today. Pam led the charge and helped us launch what is now our year-long partnership opportunities. Instead of going to every foundation and every corporation in town saying, will you fund our special event? Will you fund this special event? How about this special event? Oh wait, we're having a special event. We said, how would you like to be our partner all year long? And Pam said, I'm thinking about that. They gave at an amount that's 4 times what we've received from them in the past. And that's how we're going to build sustainability, and that's how we're going to build community. And I want to thank Pam and the folks at Kroger, and I want to invite you to see a video from Monica.
Hello, I'm Monica Garns, president of Fry's Food Stores, a division of the Kroger Company. I am honored to be a part of the Stand Against Racism Summit. I have worked for the Kroger Company for over 27 years, and we believe in an associate-first culture that reflects the diverse communities we serve. When we see our associates, customers, and neighbors affected by systemic racism, discrimination, and injustice, we are called to act in accordance with our values. We do this both internally and externally. Internally, we began holding listening sessions with associates throughout the company following the social unrest we all experienced in 2020. We then mobilized our passion, scale, and resources to develop and implement a framework for action to address what our associates said was important to them. We continue to hold listening sessions because we know listening and taking action is a vital part of addressing systemic issues. We take intentional steps to create a diverse workforce at Fry's. I'm proud to say we are truly an equal opportunity employer, and you will see leaders and associates in our stores representing all of our Arizona communities. I am fortunate to work in an organization whose values are consistent with my own: diversity, inclusion, honesty, integrity, safety, and respect. Together, we will continue to pursue true equality and create lasting change. Thank you.
Thank you, Pam. Thank you, Monica. Thank you for, again, investing in us as we try to do things differently. So appreciate that very much. It is my great honor to bring up Margaret. Margaret Mitchell is the CEO of YWCA USA. Yeah, last night she said some very nice things about me, and I'm going to say some just as nice things about her. She leads with her heart, and her dedication to our mission just is, she doesn't have to explain it, she just lives it. Just in the kinds of things that she mentioned, the way she shows up, and even on Zooms with 200 associations across the nation, building community amongst our associations is something that we have to do nationally as well. So she came into our movement in a place where we have some internal healing to do as well to strengthen our movement, and she's not shying away from that. She's also not shying away from pushing the envelope forward and making sure that people see the racial justice work that this organization has been doing for 160 years. I would like to bring up my new best friend, Margaret Mitchell.
Thank you, Debbie. It's so good to be here. I do have some remarks that I wanted to make. I'm going to share some key things that I wanted to impart with you today, and then I'm going to give a talk. But I will let you know that I use the She series. I live in a Black mama body, and I am very much passionate about this work. And I want to say to you that you are here knowing what you know. You came knowing. You came knowing what you need to do. You came knowing why you need to do it. And I'm here, and everyone else is here to support you in your knowing. Nothing magical is going to happen from my talk. Nothing magical is going to happen with the panel, except you're going to tap into your knowing. Trust your knowing. Over the last 10 years, over the last 2 years during the pandemic, we really got to sit in our knowing in a very different way. And it's time to continue to lean into that. I also wanted to tell you how important soul care is. Debbie mentioned it. I just want to reinforce it. When we do work for others, we give out of this well until we can't give anymore. Who is taking care of you? Who is supporting you? Who is hearing you? You all are there for everyone else all of the time. You are often the caretaker to participants. You are often the family, right? The go-to in the family. Who is taking care of you? During the pandemic, I did a lot of work around understanding compassion. And it's been an amazing experience spending 2 years looking at compassion, not as a feeling, but as an action, a way of being, and accountability. I did a lot of work through Stanford University. They actually have a compassion cultivation training at Stanford University. It's called CCT. And you can engage with, it's the most amazing work. It is missing an equity lens. I've talked to them about that. But it really supported my self-care. I'm also currently doing work with Resmaa Menakem. He is the author of My Grandmother's Hands, and I can't recommend that book enough. Work through it very slowly. You'll need to put it down at times, but that somatic work, that body work, we hold so much in our body. And as someone who is always doing racial justice work, always in spaces where there has been racialized trauma or there is racialized trauma, it stays in our body. And I have trauma my trauma has trauma. And so I've currently been doing work with him. It's been amazing. And then I have a small triad of 3 women that I do even more in-depth work with. I have a therapist and I have a coach. And I leave my office every day at 3 o'clock. I have lunch every day. I walk every day, or I bike every day. And I always didn't. And one of the things we must do is take our soul care seriously. If you don't take it seriously, nobody else is going to take it seriously for you. And the last thing that I wanted to say was just a little bit about our history, because I love the history of the YWCA, and not very many people. We don't always talk about it, and we don't always share the history of the YWCA. So the YWCA is founded first in Boston, and then the national office is sort of grounded in 1858. So just to ground you, the Civil War happens between 1861 and 1865. 1858, the YWCA is founded. It is all white. It is the women, the wives really, of industry who come together. And they come together, and they, a clear savior complex to be in the bed, what I call the bed and bread business. They provided beds and they provided bread. mostly to unwed girls. Oh, can't have those unwed girls now, can we? And women who were destitute. Remember, there's no Social Security, and the YWCA was there. One of the very first shifts in the movement was for us to build buildings. And so we build buildings mostly in downtown spaces all across the country. Many of our buildings were built by one of the first female architects, Julia Morgan. And Julia Morgan actually builds, she's the first registered architect in the United States. She had an office in Berkeley, and the YWCA was one of her biggest commissions, ongoing clients. And she builds a building in Honolulu that still stands, and she puts a massive pool in the middle of this building in Honolulu. And that really shifts us, it begins a shift from the bed and bread into what I call the swim and gym. And the swim and gym is often where we get confused with you know who. And the thing about the swim and gym is that in this year, the 50th anniversary of Title IX, we don't take our rightful place in America in the history of understanding women, recreation, competitive sports, fitness, body image. All of that gets grounded at the YWCA for white women. In somewhere along the way, and I'm not exactly sure where, you see Black YWCAs emerging, and they are known as the Phyllis Wheatley. And you see white YWCAs, and they're just known as YWCA. And it is through a lot of things happen. Some of them, yes, there's a lot of bamboozling that happens between the Black YWCAs and the white YWCAs. But in the 40s, the YWCA says we have got to move towards integrating our associations. And they actually, I think it's 1946 or 1947, put this in the bylaws. And this is really a little bit groundbreaking. It's also in the 40s that a woman by the name of Dorothy Height, who had been a lifelong member of the YWCA, gets her first job at the YWCA in Harlem, New York. That YWCA in Harlem, New York is all that in a bag of chips. I mean, everybody comes through there. Every Saturday night, my husband always picks a movie for me to watch. And several years ago, he picked a movie on Polly Murray. Polly Murray fans? And I love this movie. I'm just all into Polly Murray. And I'm like, just her age and the things she did, just as a hunch, I thought, I wonder if she had any connection to the YWCA. Polly Murray. I think that Polly Murray is an amazing person. And I believe that she would use the they pronouns if she was here today. But you know, I can't really suppose that. But Polly Murray was brilliant. Polly Murray was the architect of Brown versus Board of Education, when she was a student at Howard University. And she presents this structural dismantling of discrimination in the education system. As a student at Howard, one of only 2 students presenting as female in the university law school. She presents it to the dean and the professors, and they act like nothing. And then when the opportunity presents, they claw back what she had built. And that is what is presented at the Supreme Court. Polly Murray, she talks about living at the YWCA in Harlem and the amazing women that she encounters. And she talks about meeting Dorothy Height, who was the director of the YWCA at that time. Dorothy Height goes from being the director of the YWCA in the 40s. She has a stint as a CEO of the YWCA in Washington, D.C. And while she's there, she later would come to work at the national office of YWCA USA. I've been reading her letters. It is just unreal. It's like they were written yesterday. Dorothy Height in 1963 is the only woman on the platform with Dr. Martin Luther King during the 1963 march. The director of the YWCA's first racial office of racial justice. It's Dorothy Height who spends from 1963 to 1970 doing workshops and building the acumen within this organization that is white and in the swim and gym business to ensure that in 1970, they take a vote for one imperative. That our one imperative would be eliminating racism and empowering women. That happens unanimously in 1970, because in 1963, she starts doing the work, building towards that moment. Let me tell you how fabulous. I used to think, oh, they took the vote and then they didn't do anything. This is not true. I now know from being in the archives that they take the vote, and in 1971, I'm in the archives, which are held at Smith College today, and there is a flyer. I wish I had sent it so you all could see the flyer, because it is just absolutely incredible. It's a flyer announcing the web. It's an Eliminate Racism Institutes. 1971. It shows the web of racism. And then below it are these boxes, and every box is a city. And between April and May, all of these institutes were happening in which they are looking at structural racism. So every city had a different, I'm telling you, I am telling you, every city had a different topic, from criminal justice, the impact of racism, housing, education, higher ed, healthcare. It is, my Lord. And the cities include Nebraska. Yeah. So what happened? You know, I don't know exactly what happened. I do think in the 90s, the funding dried up. And when funding starts drying up, you change gears in order to survive as a movement and as an association. And so for the most part, you see the YWCA putting down the work of eliminating racism and having more of a focus on empowering women. And I believe that that harmed America. I think we weren't showing up. And it's time now. It's time now to get back to the work of really operationalizing equity. And that's what you see here. That's what you see here in Arizona and with the work that's happening in Phoenix and Tucson. So I'm just going to stop there and see if there are any questions that you might have, and then I'll go into really my talk.
Threat that you see from operationalizing equity. You see schools trying to do that, and there is the pushback. And I know you're going to talk about that a little bit later, the critical race theory. That seems like many schools are trying to operationalize equity, or at least build it, or at least tell the truth about history. So what kind of pushback are you seeing? What kind of threat exists when you operationalize equity?
One thing that we know about movements and history is that they have cycles, and we have to be prepared for the pushback. And we have to work in dormant periods, in difficult periods, and continue to plan and coalition build. So I know that in a room like this, and that's where the pushback happens, because we so easily get distracted by other games and one-upmanship and who has funding and who doesn't have funding. And we constantly are taking our eye off the prize and believe that this school board fight is really the thing that we should be concentrating on, instead of doing the work to understand how we build and bridge and move and progress. And it is taking our eye off the prize is the oldest tactic in the book. Distracting us so that the bamboozle can happen and the structure stays in place and keeps moving. It is the most effective threat. Fear is the other. It's just such a powerful, the whole country has been built on fear, and who we should be afraid of and why. Again, it's just the powerful tool to keep us from really doing the work. And I know that it's so important to build coalition, to build tables, to build partnerships, to build relationship, to be in relationship with others, and to be in relationship with those that are not among the willing. We have to be in relationship with those that are not among the willing, because relationships really matter. And the only way we get to hear and know and see and understand is through relationship. And we're not doing enough of it. We're not being intentional enough. I was saying last night to Jen, I'm not doing enough work with Latino women, with Chicano women. And I am not hearing that voice. And it's so important for us to build coalition. Relationships really do matter. And I want us to remember that we can spend a lot of time pointing fingers and thinking that, well, if those folks over there, that group, if they just got on the diversity bandwagon, right? And, you know, we really have to recognize how much is in our own knowing. So I have spent my whole life being focused on social justice. And yet, the first 4 years I was with the YWCA, I refer to myself as the imposter in chief. I'd spent my whole life focused on social justice. How in the world did I spend my first 4 years as imposter in chief? My whole life, I grew up in Fresno, California. So I like being in the desert. Fresno, my father was a civil engineer for the Bureau of Reclamation. This is the federal arm that dams the water for the irrigation and the canals. My father knew most of the big white farmers in the San Joaquin Valley. My father and mother were also friends. Their closest friends were lieutenants in the United Farm Worker Movement. So I would be playing with my best friend, Margaret Reyes, who still lives in Fresno, and she is the person who checks on my mother, who's 91 and still drives. Don't ask me. Don't. She checks on my mother every week. I would be at Margaret Reyes's house, and they would get bomb threats. I would hear at the Reyeses strategy for the United Farm Worker Movement, a movement originally designed, part of what they wanted was group burial service, because DDT was dropped on farm workers as they worked. I couldn't, it was, you know, you don't really appreciate hearing strategy, but being inside that United Farm Worker Movement, the most amazing thing, I never heard hate. And I still don't understand that. I still can't make that make sense, how that was. But I didn't hear hate. And that has always had the most impactful experience on me. So a lifetime being around social justice, 4 years as imposter in chief, key takeaway: you can have passion, but not purpose. You can have passion and not a practice. And if you just have practice, if you just have passion, and you don't have purpose and a practice, you can't progress. You just can't. So how did I retire my imposter in chief role? Well, that began in 2014. I was the CEO of YWCA Greater Cleveland, where I have been imposter in chief for 4 years. And in 2014, a little boy was murdered. He was playing outside of a rec center. I think that is an appropriate place to play. And he had a toy gun in his hand. You can see the video, and it is clearly a boy. And the police roll up, and he is gunned down. It was in November of 2014, and my staff literally lined up outside my door. And they came in one by one. And some people said something, some people handed me something, and some people turned their back on me. And what they conveyed was, what are we doing here? What the hell are we doing? We walk in this building every day that says eliminating racism and empowering women, and we have nothing. We do nothing. We are nothing. And I committed that Mayor Rice's death would be the place where we would move forward. I'm sorry. What I wanted to share as a key takeaway is don't ever toss aside that moment that ignited your passion. Don't toss aside that moment that re-engaged your commitment. That's why we have a stand every year, to publicly reaffirm our commitment. So in 2015, beginning of 2015, I've sketched out a little plan. Now, mind you, over the 4 years, we've done a little bit of training. We've done a little bit of this and a little bit of that. But, you know, Glinda the Good Witch in The Wizard of Oz, what does she say? You've always had the power, my dear. You just had to learn it for yourself. And so I decided we would be focused internally. We would stop what we were doing externally and playing around. And I had two really important things that I wanted to share with the organization. I wanted to make sure that the organization knew that we were going to stop peddling our own brand of white supremacy. And I wanted the organization to understand that the problem is not with those people out there. That our organization and our structure and our way of doing things was also part of the problem. We are all taught. And the nonprofit industry is part of the cottage industry of handing somebody a Band-Aid when they're having a stroke. No one really wants to speak truth to power. Yesterday, when I was getting ready to come on this trip, I was getting ready to go to the airport. I had GMA on, this beautiful young Black woman, was getting ready to go up in SpaceX. And she's a geologist, and she was amazing and just such a powerful representation for all of us. And she said, paraphrasing, I really do want to see young people of color have more access, right? This is what we hear, right? Whether you're talking education or social determinants of health, access, right? How do we do this thing? What she doesn't say is, how do we hold school districts and teachers just as accountable for creating more success, being able to recognize their own bias? And we're gonna stop looking at outcomes for kids and start looking at outcomes for school districts and teachers. And we're going to look at the structure and what we could do to change the structure differently. This morning, I looked at the Arizona report cards, and the website was lovely. I mean, it was just like, you could just get anything you wanted to know. It told me everything. And what I saw, I looked at the Phoenix, I think I was looking at Phoenix ISD. 79% of the students are Hispanic. I didn't get to see the disaggregated teacher data. And maybe it was there, maybe it's there in the website. It's not what they led with. Isn't it amazing how you can turn your phone off from your watch? It's just really crazy. I'm going down the report card and I get to there's a civil rights section. And in the civil rights section, it tells me the number of school suspensions and all the data on who's been kicked out, who's been arrested, all of that civil rights data. It didn't tell me, and maybe it's there, and I need to dig further. Tell me if I'm wrong. But it didn't tell me how many, what grades and what teachers, what schools send the most kids, right? How is this, where is, right? How we did this, no child is doing something by himself. How do we understand what schools have higher rates? I want to know this. This is the structure. This is the structure. When we look at social determinants of health, we are not acknowledging that in the last 2016 report of residents and medical students, that group of students from the University of Virginia overwhelmingly still believe that Blacks feel less pain and don't need pain medications. So we need access for more. We need to understand how to hold the system. The system is not broken. The system is working just fine. And it is absolutely so important for us. Yes, we are downstream doing this work. but we have to work together to push and advocate on the system. So I want to ask you, do you need to reimagine your internal work? Are you speaking truth to structures? Are you the only person on your team with racial equity muscle? As my team made the pivot internally, in 2015, the first thing we did was look at our compensation structure. At that time, as an association, we were paying the minimum wage, which in Ohio was about $7.10. It is not possible to, we employed adults. It's not possible for adults to live on that. And yet, we were asking them to do amazing work for $7.10 an hour. So we moved our wage in 2015 to $15 an hour. At that time, it wasn't even a conversation. And it was scary as all get out. Could we sustain it? How do we keep doing it? Where do we go? Is this, and we just kept moving. In 2016, we began looking at our HR policies. And you have to do this slowly. You do this with your teams. In 2017, we really began looking at our practices. And in 2018, we brought it all together with a level of accountability by creating equity plans. And each team would have an equity plan that they created, and then performance reviews would be against this equity plan, because we say that eliminating racism is our mission. At the time, you couldn't even Google an equity plan. So we were just creating all of this ourselves. Along the way, in Cleveland, we were looking for a tool to support our whole staff. We had 120 staff, all working different shifts. And so we created this challenge built on the work of Dr. Eddie Long, based upon Debbie Irving's book, Waking Up White. In the book, she says it takes 21 days to build a muscle. And so we built this little challenge for our staff, as our staff professional development. And we built this tool, and somewhere along the way, it was like, I wonder if other people would want to do it. And lo and behold, they did. In 2019, it was the 400-year commemoration from 1619 to 2019 of really the beginning of the commercial end of slavery. Slavery exists before, but this is sort of the scaling business part of it. And so we came together with a partner who, first year Cleveland, who was and is the countywide initiative to end infant mortality. Infant mortality, again, we stay focused on the brown and black mother. We do not have a focus. There's almost no data or outcomes on physicians, hospitals. We should do both. Try it, you're right. Data tells a story, but if you're only getting one half of the story, you're always in the wrong position. Every strategy will be wrong because you only have half of the story. It is not possible. You have to look. You have to grab that other data. You have to know what professors, who's failing, who's exiting, who, right? So we do this summit, 400 years of inequity. We decide we're going to do the summit, and we decide together that we need this call to action. At the time, if you were doing a commemoration, there was a website encouraging national commemorations all across the country. And the website encouraged a call to action. And so we knew we wanted to have a call to action, and we couldn't, we were just flailing around. And finally, in May of 2019, our summit was scheduled for November of 2019. Isabel Wilkerson kicked us off. We went to every foundation in town asking for funding, and they all said, we don't do events. Great, this is an event. We had, in May of 2019, Milwaukee County declared racism a public health crisis. And I called my colleague in Milwaukee at the YWCA. I wanted to know, I knew she had to be plugged in. This is the YWCA. And she told me how they were involved, it was huge. I spent 3 days with her, and we decided that our call to action for our 400 Years of Inequity Summit, our call to action would be to declare racism a public health crisis. We brought in the folks from Milwaukee County as a core centerpiece. We had 2 days. We have Isabel Wilkerson, we have Harriet Washington, who wrote Medical Apartheid, another amazing book that I absolutely love. She's also just written a book on environmental racism. We had John Powell. If you don't know John Powell, he is the director of the Belonging and Othering Institute. His work is absolutely amazing, amazing, amazing. John is also the founding director of GARE, which is Government Alliance for Racial Equity. GARE is doing amazing work. Municipalities like Stockton and others, GARE, backbone, GARE. Just as a side note, we do this conference, I just named some folks, and we ended the conference and we were $70,000 in the hole. And we literally, these two organizations, YWCA and First Year Cleveland, every month, we would call people, we're gonna pay you, we're gonna pay you, we're gonna pay you. And we just went month by month. It took us 6 months to pay off that $70,000. No one wanted to fund racial equity work. Racism as a public health crisis is scaffolding. It is a framework in which you build and work. And you need to build a table in which to do this long-term work with cities and counties. And that's what happened in many cities across Ohio. And YWCA leads these tables or is part of these tables. The work, our racial equity work as a YWCA, this YWCA in Phoenix has done incredible work around their governance. All of this is really important. They have opportunity to do further backbone work, looking at structures, also incredible. I want to just close you with 2 Martin Luther King quotes that I want to share with you. Because the theme of this year is Why We Can't Wait. And Dr. King, in his book, Why We Can't Wait, which is, it is a roadmap. It is the most, when you read the book that he wrote in 1963, you just can't believe that it was written in 1963. It's just incredible. But he says, the ultimate tragedy of Birmingham was not the bad people, but the silence of the good people. The ultimate tragedy of Birmingham was not the bad people, but the silence of the good people. Where are you silent? Where is your voice needed? And the last quote I'll leave you with is, now is the time to lift our national policy from the quicksand of racial injustice to the solid rock of human dignity. Now is the time to lift our national policy. Isn't it a feeling? Our national policy from the quicksand of racial injustice to the solid rock of human dignity. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Yeah, any quick questions? I mean, that was, I need to marinate on that a minute. Thank you so much, Margaret. Thank you, thank you. I'm gonna, I think, give us a quick break, and then we're gonna come back and we're gonna see how this month's Stand Against Racism challenge that Margaret's team originated a while back is now a national opportunity. We partnered with Southern Arizona, but we're going to see those national themes come to life with our esteemed panel of presenters to talk about those important issues. Maybe 5 minutes, is that good? Because I know we're a little behind schedule, but I will keep us on time. Okay, thank you, thank you. Welcome, everybody. Welcome, welcome. Thank you again, Margaret, from the bottom of my heart. Last night when we were chatting, you know, I do feel like sisters with Margaret. She and I had never met. I've seen her a few times on video in the past couple of months, but we are aligned. This is going to be a fun ride. It is the time to bring that National Stand Against Racism challenge to life here in Phoenix. And we have an esteemed panel of subject matter experts related to all 4 of the themes. Now, I don't want to put you on the spot, but how many of us have been doing or looking at the Stand Against Racism challenge this past month? A few of us, excellent. It's hard to do every day, I'll give you that, right? I catch up on the weekends or, you know, look at it another time, but it's so important, just little tidbits that make you think and process the way that Margaret helped share with that. It's about the systems. Incredible esteemed panel. The panel moderator, I mean, there are so many people I want to grow up and be like. Now, the first thing is I have to decide to grow up, but I want to grow up and be like all these people. Dr. Tara Nkrumah is on our board. I'll give a shout out to our other board members at the end of the show. But Tara comes to us with so much brilliance and insight. Her day job is still technically at ASU in their Center for Gender Equity in Science and Technology. Her real job, though, is being on our board. She kind of does. And she lives that practice of teaching folks how to look at the systems and how to increase opportunities for young people, particularly young women of color. So thank you. And she's just so brilliant, but not in the kind of way that makes you feel like, oh, wow, that's a really smart person. But she's just really smart and really connected to who she is and what she's about. So I want to thank her for being here today. She is going to introduce all of our esteemed panel, but want to remind you, the 4 themes are not for the faint of heart. Reproductive justice, pay equity and the pay gap, representation in film and media, and the 4th one I always forget.
Critical race.
See, I was testing you. Well done, Anthony, since you're going to talk about that. Critical race theory. So again, national campaign coming to life right here. Dr. Nkrumah, take it away.
Thank you, Debbie. So I want to do things different. And those of you that know me know I like to do things different. And so instead of the traditional introducing of each person, I want them to introduce themselves, but let me tell you how. I want you to tell me your name. Where did you get your name from? Who named you? Is there a meaning behind your name? Do you have a nickname? And do you feel like your name represents who you are personality-wise? And so I'm going to just start with myself. My first name is Tara. My mother saw the movie Gone with the Wind, and she loved the name of the plantation. Go figure. Why? Okay. But at any rate, we'll forgive her. And she gave me the name Tara because she loved it. But I've over time learned, even though I'm 18, that in India, my name means star. And my husband, he's schooled in Romania, and he said the name Tara means countryside. And in other languages, I'm understanding that my name has a meaning. So I like to think of myself as an international person, and I feel like my name fits me in that way. And then my nickname, Garfield, and y'all know Odie, right? So my friend in high school gave me the nickname Odie because he said I had bug eyes and I was always talking. And so he felt like, you are Odie. And that name has stayed with me. Even when I earned my doctorate degree, my family got a shirt that said Dr. Odie on it, and they had Odie pictures. So anyone that calls me Odie, I know that they come from way back when and they love me, and that's a name of endearment. So do we all got the rules now for introducing ourselves? All right, so I'm going to start over here.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Ywca Mbolu. I gave you my full name because I'm first generation Nigerian. I'm from the Igbo tribe, and when I'm back home, my name is Chika, and everyone in my tribe has a name with chi in it because it relates to our God, and so mine means God is the greatest. My nickname is May. It got longer. Originally, they wanted to call me Mary, but we just have too many Marys in my household. And so my mom's nickname was May, and my sister's name is Kay. And so we're KK and May, and we are not twins. And so that is the significance of my name. And actually, in my tribe, my last name, it's with an M, Mbolu, but it's very uncommon. It should be with an O, so it should be Ogbolu. So that's just an interesting fact. Pass it to you.
My name is, can you hear me? No.
Hello, everyone. My name is Perletta Ywca Ramos, and I have to tell you both of those because my mother named me after my aunt Perlette, and my father Jose Joe Weena. I'm a little Pearl, or at least I was. My nickname I was ashamed of because it was Poopy when I was a little girl. But after listening to Tara, maybe I should get a t-shirt that says Dr. Poopy, because that's funny.
Hey everyone, my name's Alejandra. Well, actually my name is Miriam Alejandra Pablos Espriu. I go by Alejandra. Actually, I don't know why I don't go by my first name. I think my mom didn't like it because my dad chose that name. And then she chose Alejandra, so she's like, you're gonna go by Alejandra. Oh, wow. But also, I think in school, kids were mean. They were like, oh, is your name medium, large, small? And then somehow I informed myself and told myself maybe I started choosing Alejandra, but everybody calls me Ale. It's a shorter name, and they just kind of like it that way. Sometimes my mom calls me Alex. And then for some reason, there's like a few of us in my family that they call Tita. So they used to call me Tita. Now that I'm older and all of us are kind of like, don't call us by your nicknames, you know? Everybody just calls me Ale. There's still a few folks that use Tita or Titina. But I think I'm more interested in sharing some of the nicknames the movement has given me. We'll talk more about reproductive justice and about abortions. And if you don't like abortions, just don't have them. But they call me the godmother of abortions. Call me community gangsta. Just because my work sits at the intersections of criminalization, immigration, and incarceration. So yeah, and I'm Mexicana, so I think that's where, I don't know, Alejandra come from. Actually, I Googled Alejandra once when I was really little, and it was like, it came from Alexander the Great, and it was like, Alejandra means defender of mankind. And for a while I used that because I do a lot of social justice work, but then I was like, it doesn't seem like it relates to me, but yeah, that's all. I'll pass it to.
Can I have your mic? You know you have arrived when you're on a panel with God, Dr. Poopy, and Community Gangster. Good morning, everyone. My name is Anthony Perkins. I don't have a beautiful story like all of you as far as my name. I'm going to guess. I'm half white and half black. My white side is Italian and Polish. So I believe that's why I was named Anthony. It's more of an Italian name. And that's the story I have for my name.
All right, thank you. So do you guys now feel like you're connecting a little bit closer to them? And so that was way better than me reading their lovely bios. But I also want to do one more thing because I think this will contextualize their conversations more for you. And so I want to ask the question, what do you want to be remembered for? What do you want to be remembered for as the foreground for our conversation? So Anthony, we'll start with you.
Great question. I love that. Oh, is it off? Is my okay? It is working. Okay. Can you guys hear me?
Did you turn it on?
Because I'm struggling with my voice. Yeah, it's on. It's on. Okay. But there's
I guess this is louder.
that's louder.
That's why I chose
That's why I
that.
didn't know if mine was working. Okay, if you can hear me, great. I'm struggling with my voice because of seasonal allergies right now. So if you hear me sniffling, I don't have COVID. It's allergies and it's kicking my butt this morning big time. So that's why I'm struggling right now. So I'm hoping my face doesn't explode within the hour. The question was, what do I want to be remembered for? I love that. I ask that a lot to teams. My calling in life from my higher power is education. And I love working with students and teams. And I just was blessed with finishing a 28-year career in the education field. I just retired about 7 months ago. My last position being a school superintendent for 9 years. I started as a teacher, vice principal, director, and then moved up to the superintendency. I just want to be remembered as making an impact. Especially now retiring, I really want to dive deeper into helping others. And that's what I would love to be remembered for.
You're going to be remembered. Let's see. I also like that question. And then I thought about what I want to be remembered with my family. Looks different than what I want to remembered maybe outside of my family. I don't know why I thought about that. But so my family, I would love to be remembered by the person that kind of broke the chain and started to share stories. My family doesn't share any stories. They don't want to talk about it. It already happened. I'm already this old. I'm not going to change. Yes, you are. Right? Like the first time that I'm asking about stories about our past, about our family tree, and people are like, and then when I start asking, they just circle around, you know? So I want to be remembered by everybody in my family, by the first person that actually was able to sit and listen to them. And then I think in the wider movement space, I also want to be remembered by the first person that people shared the stories that they had carried so much around with shame, baggage. And I'm already doing that, and it's really beautiful because I'm the first person people talk to about their incarceration, right? The things that led them to their incarceration, the things that racialized them. I like to be remembered by the first person they've ever shared that they had an abortion or that they needed a ride, and I was the one that took them there, right? I want to be remembered, even if I don't know them, that person that took me there when nobody else took me, because in Arizona, we have to get rides, and other people got to take us, and you got to get a hotel, and we got to pick you up from Tucson to go to Phoenix. And even if I don't know you, the face, right? That first face and that smile of somebody who took you to get the reproductive health care you needed. So I want to be remembered by the first times you share something, because when you share something, people share something back with you, and shame gets released little by little.
Well, let me try my mic. Just start talking. So can you hear me? No. Okay. Sorry, I'm not supposed to move it. Is it better now? Is it better now? I'll just talk loud, and then you can tell me. Okay. I got a whole lot to say about how I want to be remembered. I'm going to summarize it in like a couple sentences.
It's not working? Okay. The first, I think, is being heart-centered, right? We live in a world that is so full of disconnection. We're disconnected often from our family members, our friends, because we're so busy in the pursuit. And so living a life that feels meaningful to me and having that really just radiate so that you feel the presence of me in the space is really important. I would say that the second thing is the impact. I'm at a place in my life now where it's frankly, it's not about me. I've been able to achieve certain things in my life that have been important. I see myself as paving the way for other people. And so I want to be remembered for making a difference in the lives of young girls and women in particular, because we birth nations, of being a fighter and helping them claim their voice and their power to change the world. That's how I'd like to be remembered.
So I'm not going to look at Tara because I'm going to change the question a little bit. Her and I go back a couple months, so I don't know if it's about what I want to be remembered for. I'm going to talk about it for today's conversation. I think what I'm hoping that the conversation will have is that you all will remember that women and women of color are talking about economics and policy and really understanding that we are the economy. It's not the economists, and that as we talk about these issues, you can really see yourself in them and recognize that you're actually the expert. When we talk about cost of living, inflation, home ownership, the wage gap, we're talking about us. You know, this is our story. And so I think that is what I'm hoping this conversation will get there. You'll leave and be like, wow, this Black woman talked about economics, but I can too, right? And I hope that in 10, 15 years tomorrow, we start seeing more people that look like us talking about these issues that have been dominated by male, have been dominated by white men, and have been politicized by folks that maybe really don't understand it. So, thank you.
So I'm going to remember you for changing my question. So thank you, and thank you for setting the context. So as May said, this is a conversation. And so we've laid the foundation, we're in conversation, we're not following a standard. So thank you for giving permission to just change things. I may ask a question, you may want something different, so do it. So I have several questions here, and I invite the audience as well to be thinking of your questions that you may have, because I can pause, and if you feel the burning need to, ask your question, please raise your hand and let me know. So the first question up. Each of you are representing a systemic issue in our state, Arizona, if you didn't know where we were. Tell us more about this issue and what barriers are you seeing in your fields that affect women and, more in particular, people of color the most. So I'm going to pick Alejandra.
Thank you. So I'm here, if y'all couldn't tell, as a reproductive justice person. And I think for me, I can share that I think what empowered me the most as a woman, obviously, was releasing shame. Let's just start there. So I remember, I'm from Tucson. I remember when I first went to the YWCA in Tucson, and I worked with, I think they had like a poverty initiative. No me acuerdo what it was called, something like that. And it was being amongst like older women, Spanish-speaking people, and really having those like conversations around my experience, right? My personal experience. And even amongst my community, it was a lot of shame, right? A lot of shame. So I think shame, myths, taboos are something that really are barriers for our communities, for our work. I think the reason why we do storytelling and the way that we do it very intimately is super important because again, we get to look each other one in like eye to eye, and when folks are ready to share, they're gonna share, right? I remember sharing with my mother once when I was actually getting paid to be an abortion storyteller and advocate in Virginia. I remember I moved away from Arizona to do this work because this place wasn't ready. At least that's how I felt. So I left to DC, worked for like 3 years, and came back. But I remember I shared with my mom, like, have to share my abortion story because I'm asking people to share their own stories, right? And I also felt a lot of shame and stigma. And then, but I also learned by doing that work that 8 out of 10 people that love someone will support you to have an abortion, whether they're gonna have one or not. So I had to really learn that, and then I shared with my mom, I had, and I have multiple abortions, but I only shared one, right? And I'm like, Mom, I had an abortion. And she kind of was like, I don't want to hear it. And she kind of like hung up the phone. Wasn't rude or nothing, but you know, because she loves me a lot and listens and knows I'm an expert and trusts me, but everything's like so hard for her to hear, right? As I'm normalizing these things, as I'm like just walking into these spaces of just shame, right? Taboo and myth, we don't talk about them. And I let her be. And I said, you know, my work's gonna speak for itself, and she's gonna be ready to talk to me about my reproductive care one way. And accidentally, I invited her to the Caesar's Palace when I spoke. I think it was the Abortion Care Network, abortion providers everywhere, and I was a keynote, and I did a keynote called Abortion Showers. And there was an interpretation there, so I was like, she's not gonna hear everything, you know, she's not gonna know. Well, my mom's been here all her life. She's a US citizen, and she asked me later, she was like, how many abortions have you had? And she goes, I can't believe I'm asking you this. And then I said, it's fine, Mom, like you're ready to hear it, you know? And I told her, and she said, wow, you're so brave. Right? So I think we just have to trust ourselves that we're loved by people that may think different from us, right? That it's our duty to share our experience. And I think we have to slap shame in the face every day, not just for abortions or for like making our own decisions over our own bodies, right? But shame in like so many different areas of our life, right? By choosing different partners and making mistakes. How many times have y'all chose the wrong fucking partner? Right? And those like, even those things come from things, right? We don't share with people like what we're going through personally, right? But these are like real interpersonal conversation experiences that we have, right? So I guess for me, it's just debusting myths and taboos all day. That's what I do all day. And I don't care. Right now, we have an abortion shower coming up. One of my best friends wanted to host one. They just had a self-managed abortion at home, and they wanted to call it a slut's shower. I know. I was like, I'm not a slut, but I've been called a slut. Right? You don't have, I mean, what you wear, you might get called that, right? In the street. So it's way beyond if I'm actually that, right? We're talking about things that are just criminalized and shamed, right? You hear myths about it, you hear taboos about, oh, you hear about the hanger, right? The clothes hanger when you talk about abortions. No, we've been taking care of each other. We've been catching babies, catching missed pregnancies, right? We've been helping people abort because not everybody wants to parent. And are you gonna force someone to parent? That's where we're at now, right? You're gonna shame someone to parent. So I think those are the big barriers for us, and I think that's why we do this work. And even if I'm not a fucking slut, I'm gonna go in there and really talk about that and support my friend, right? Because there are people that that do talk about sex in this way. I remember her sharing, you know what? Why can't we have unprotected sex? And I was like, and she was like, it's just because it's not safe. And I'm like, well, is it not safe just because you're having unprotected sex with your partner and you guys are talking to each other and you happen to get pregnant, right? So even within that conversation, we're gonna talk about how like, even if you're not a slut, right? Or even if you don't do these things, does that really mean you're not taking care of each other when you're having unprotected sex? Right? We take care of each other. We take care of one another, right? So I think it's about having conversations that people are scared to have conversations, right? So I think just leaning into the uncomfortable conversations. We have so many people responding to us like, you know what, you just challenged my insidious Catholic beliefs because I thought that abortion should be a last resort. Okay, what about the people that don't want to be pregnant? Right? So I think it's trying to really like make people do stuff. Again, if you don't like abortions, you don't believe in them, just don't have them.
I have spent the last 30, well, I'm 53. I say that because I had a birthday recently. I'm going to say my first recognition of gender inequality was in my household. I was 8. It's my earliest childhood memory that I recall watching my mother be the victim of domestic violence. And there was violence in our household, which was normal. And I used to want to save my mother. And then that desire turned into an interest in saving women. Now, I know women now don't need to be saved, but that was the perspective that really formed my beliefs, because I saw my mother as this brilliant woman who was capable of many things. But because of its historical trauma in her own life and because of how she felt about herself, she was subjugated into a role that she fit in. And so I became a lawyer because I wanted to do civil rights work and to change the systems that disproportionately impacted women and people of color because of the intersectionality that exists. And then over the years, that interest, I've done quite a bit with a law degree. After practicing law for about 13 years, I went back to school and got a PhD in psychology. My focus was in humanistic and transpersonal psychology, which looks at the transpersonal focuses on the higher aspects of being, which is we're more than just a body, right? There's transcendental experiences, spiritual experiences that I think are real. So when Margaret was talking about, claiming who we are, I was like, my mind, like the fullness of who we are, which includes our transcending the limitations of identity. And the growth part is, I believe we're all here to grow and to evolve, not just ourselves, but then collectively to evolve really what it means to be human. And what's really significant for me that informs all of my work, which I'll speak to in just a sec, and I think we're going to show a video, is that not just the media, that's a piece of it, but the very nature of how we engage, right? Materialism, capitalism, industrialization has us focused so much less on our humanity and much more on acquiring things and being successful. There's almost an obsession with it, in my opinion. And being a lawyer, it certainly impacts lawyers disproportionately for a whole host of reasons. But I think it keeps us disconnected from ourselves and one another. And it's certainly the pursuit of things keeps us disconnected from what it means to be human. And that's a compelling question for me. So tied to my work as a lawyer, I'm in the conversation of advocating with other lawyers, of having a deeper level conversation about what does equal justice in the law really mean? Why was I called into this practice of law? How am I living my values? Who am I really? Because so often people go into a profession like the law wanting to help, and then we get caught up in the systems, and then we lose ourselves. And the law touches everything, absolutely everything. And so helping to awaken lawyers to really live from that sense of who they are beyond the limitation of the job and career and pursuit feels like a calling to me. So I do that. In addition, my work extends to board. So I've served on the school board in my community, so education, because I grew up in the hood and went to a school I didn't even know was 88% Black, and that qualified me later on to get an education, to get a scholarship because I was considered disadvantaged. I didn't know that, from my childhood all the way until I applied for a loan, loans and scholarships. Anyway, I served on the school board and very much am committed to addressing the disparities that exist there and on school boards. So when Margaret talked about holding school boards accountable, I was like, absolutely. And the people who run for school boards is significant because typically we aren't at the table, which is a part of the challenge, which then leads me to some of the work that I'm doing now, which is I'm producing a film. The film is called 3 Extraordinary Women. We have a clip to show you in a sec, but just to set it up. I want to say something because Margaret was hitting on all, like the work the Y is doing right now is so phenomenal. It's hitting on so many things. The intention of the film is actually to touch the intersectionality of a number of the topics that we talked about. It tells the story of 3 women who as girls experienced trauma, different types of trauma. One, her mother was murdered in front of her when she was 6 years old. One as a result of political occupation in Palestine, and one who grew up in an environment that was riddled with domestic violence and mental health issues and alcoholism, as well as poverty. That person would be me. And so Alejandra said something about shame. I think it's really significant because many of us, I think research says about 70% of us have experienced at least one trauma. Many of us have experienced multiple traumas. We are silent in the suffering and don't even know what trauma is. So the film is intended to tell the stories of these 3 women from their perspectives as they're climbing up Mount Kilimanjaro, with this idea for you to ask yourselves, what is your Kilimanjaro? Because we each have one or multiple ones that we are overcoming. And then collectively, what is our Kilimanjaro, which is undoing racism and gender inequality. So can we cue up the...
For me, the travel and going with women is transformative. I don't really have a ton of positive childhood memories.
My family traces their ancestry in Palestine from my mom's side to the 1300 and from my father's side to the 1500.
My great-grandparents on both sides migrated to Youngstown, Ohio from Mississippi during the Great Migration.
All right, ladies. This is amazing. I know. Doesn't it make you want to go touch it?
The idea of bringing women together to explore themselves in the world simultaneously is relationship with the world and yourself awakens in you things you can't even contemplate.
We're going nice and slow. Yeah, we're gonna make it to the top.
My life was wonderful till age 10. Israel invaded the rest of Palestine and we became under occupation. That's mean hell. Just simply with one sentence, hell.
One of my earliest childhood memories was of hiding a gun because my stepfather was an abusive alcoholic, and one of the ways that he was abusive was to threaten to kill us.
We were poor. We were the working poor. My dad was abusive. He was angry at a lot of things, but mostly at the time, he couldn't figure out life.
As an 8-year-old, I needed to figure out how to navigate in a hostile environment.
I wanted to be from the resistance. So I have to become an adult at age 14 and a half.
It's hard to participate in a system that is set up for us to fail and violent towards us and our way of being. And I figured out ways to fight it.
I want women to claim their place in making a change in the system, to see the trauma that Terry, Tammy, and I have experienced, what they made it mean, because each one of us made it mean something.
I still wrestle with the fact that I think I'm not enough.
It's cold as shit out here.
And that is my personal Kilimanjaro.
I don't want to go home. I know I'm going to get to the top. I'm not sure she knows she can make it.
It challenges you to go to your innermost soul to do this. Not hating the people that abuse you, it's everyday effort, it's everyday training. Every day you say you cannot hate. Every day you say, I need to climb.
This is taking all you've got, sweetie, but you got it.
We're gonna get there, Perletta.
Yes, ma'am.
By hook or crook, we're gonna get
I
there.
was just thinking about the ancestors who walked to freedom.
Yes, ma'am.
That's what this walk is.
Yes.
They didn't quit, and neither will we.
The three amigas. We came together, go together.
It's a question I've been sitting with, walking with. Where do I hide? Where do I shut down?
Powerful life lessons for me.
But look at the stars.
Being fully present to my breath, to the beauty, allows for me to connect to myself in ways that being in the world just doesn't. There's something magical about not just the mountains, but nature for me. Everything else falls away.
All right, good job.
So that is my desire to connect women to the power of who they are, to support one another in sisterhood, because I believe the world is going to be changed when we do that. When we do that. And then it's considered a social impact film. My desire is not just to produce the documentary, although I'm producing the documentary. It is then to have these community conversations and calls to action for us to really transcend this I'm not enough worthiness BS that really keeps us from claiming the truth of who we are despite the things that have happened, and having these conversations and ridding ourselves of shame and supporting one another is one of the ways I believe we get there.
That was beautiful.
So I'm going to jump over here to Anthony and ask the question again. What barriers do you see in your field, particularly for women and people of color?
I'm going to focus on critical race theory. I want to just give you a recommendation right off the start here. Please take your time in anything you do to educate yourself before you make a decision. Our world has fallen into this big trap of, I hear something and it's true. Go to valid and reliable sources. So for example, if you have a medical issue, don't go to Wikipedia. Go to the New England Journal of Medicine, where there are peer review articles. They've been trusted for decades on their advice. That's the big thing. Critical race theory, you probably never heard this before from anyone. It's pretty easy as far as a definition. The world is doing a great job of watering it down and cherry picking it and making it their own just to justify their actions. So here it is, critical race theory. I'm going to do it in 4 steps. It's learning about systematic racism from the past. Step 1. 2, inspecting that. 3, making a conclusion. Is it good or bad? We know it's bad. And 4, in the here and now, saying, okay, let's not repeat the past. Let's work together as one, no matter what race you are, and come together and say, no more racism, no more inequalities. That's critical race theory, folks. It's not hard as far as the definition. Now, when did it start? It started in the 1970s from some legal scholars, because it was used as a measuring tool from the 1960s civil rights movement in the civil rights legislation to say, are we making any progress? And so the result was, we made some baby steps, but we haven't made significant progress. So that's how it came about in the 70s. What comes to mind is, I don't know if you guys caught this, Time magazine had a great picture in 2015. And it showed a picture from 1968 of policemen walking up the street, people running in front of them. It was a big riot. Things were being thrown, etc. It was a bad picture. And they put in 2015, they put 1968, crossed it out, and put 2015 on top. We're seeing the same things from the 60s now in 2015, 2021, etc. with the killings, etc., etc. So it's just educating yourself, then making a decision. And then to answer your question, I just want to give them a background real quick. How do we help women? How do we help people of color? It starts locally. And in my area, education, boardrooms. But educate the board members, educate the community, because they come in, and I've been involved in plenty of great board meetings and plenty of bad board meetings where people just don't simply educate themselves. And they come in with their point of view, and they hoot and holler, and they're way off. So educate yourselves on anything before you move forward in any area. So it starts locally, grassroots movements, and educating kids on it, educating your teaching teams, educating the community, have parent nights, community nights, whatever you wish to call them, but educating people on it, and then having those conversations, and then moving forward from there.
So I'm going to talk about living wage and the economy, and I'm going to really localize the issue. So, we're currently still in COVID. We're in a different iteration than we've known it. But in the past, when I would try to explain how the economic trends have changed, I would start with the Great Recession, but I'm not going to, because we're going to talk about COVID. So you probably have heard the phrase that most households are one emergency away from going into deep poverty using their credit card. And when COVID hit, we saw overnight the economy just shut down, right? Most of us got to work from home. Most of us were not essential workers. And in Arizona specifically, if you were a household that earned less than $75,000 a year, 1 in 2 of you lost some type of income. Family members lost their jobs. Our unemployment rate, in the Great Recession, that was the highest time we had an unemployment rate. During COVID, it was 7 times higher than that. We went from a 3-4% unemployment rate and jumped up to double digits. For people of color, that was way over 20%, many of them. Latino folks and Black folks hit 20%. If you had only a high school degree, you hit like 25% in this state. So 1 in 4 people with just a high school diploma lost their jobs. And then, of course, if you start breaking it down by disaggregating it by race and ethnicity, so it's, I could see the theme here, you start seeing the trends. American Indians, they couldn't even disaggregate it with just American Indians, so they put them with mixed and others. They have the highest percent. 6 out of 10 households are reporting not being able to make rent, not being able to put enough food on their table. And for Latino and Black folks, we were at 51%. And then white households were about 33%. So, you have to disaggregate, because if I told you just the story, you'd think, oh, well, Arizonans are struggling, but you're talking about 6 out of 10 American Indians reporting not having enough food on their table. And that's even with federal impact, that's even with food assistance, all these access and systems are not enough to carry the grave that we had built, right? And so I like to talk about COVID because, for some people, they're still in COVID, right? They're still recovering. People went into extreme debt. And on the other end, lots of us got to work from home. And all of a sudden, we had extra money. We weren't buying lunch out. We weren't paying for gas. That was weird. Wow, I didn't mean it like that. I don't have grass in my yard. Okay, well, this is about new conversations, right? Like, that's a different economic conversation about this. But weren't paying for gas. And so what you saw was this huge income inequality. You saw people all of a sudden being able to save money and taking their stimulus checks and going on vacation, or maybe buying themselves something they wanted for years, while most people who got the stimulus check had to use it for basic needs and essentials, especially in Arizona. I think it was like 72% of the population that qualified in our state used it for essential needs. And the story I want to talk about is if you're not disaggregating, it just looks like about 11% of our population is in poverty. But then if you look at it from a children's perspective, you're talking about 1 in 5 children. If you start breaking it by race and ethnicity, you're talking about 1 in 2 American Indian kids, 1 in 3 Latino kids in our state, you know? And so it's so important that as we start to talk about these conversations, and this is where I'm like, critical race theory is so important, and that they're lumping all this idea of disaggregating data into that, because it's telling us the full story. During the Great Recession, we all hurt, but who recovered the fastest? You know, it wasn't low-income folks, it wasn't folks with educational attainment, it wasn't people of color, it wasn't specific neighborhoods. Sorry, let me fast forward now, trying to think. I don't want to give you too much information, right? Right? So in our state, when you look at it from like a gender perspective, we actually have one of the highest labor force participations. Labor force is people who are participating in the economy. So you could have a job, you could be looking for a job, but you're not in the labor force if you've like removed yourself to raise a child or caretake, right? So Arizona has one of the highest labor force participation rates of women. And like fight everyone who tells you we don't work. But we also have one of the biggest gaps for when it comes to pay equity. Women are making 84% of the wages as a male. And I want to talk about wages in a bigger perspective. Wages look like they're up, right? But inflation is also up. And so wages are actually stagnant, and the gap is actually getting smaller and smaller. So let me put this in plain terms. So in 2016, Arizona passed a statewide minimum wage act. Do you guys remember that? We passed it by like 59%. And then, you know, I think the following year, Flagstaff turned around and passed $15. And then this past fall, Tucson passed $15. And just before I was coming here, I was like, well, let me figure out what's the average, what is the cost of living marker for the state? In Arizona, you have to make $22 an hour, and that's as of last year. I'm sure it's way up to be at a living wage. And currently, our state minimum wage is $12.80. And what you saw
Is that for like a family of 3 or what?
Yeah, that's a family of 4, 2 children and 2 folks. So that's assuming 2 people are working, you know? So each of them would need, they both need to make $22 an hour. So I just want to put that in perspective. Arizona tends to have one of the highest poverty rates. We tend to have some of the slowest economic growth. And I also want to just put this in perspective. We talked about unemployment claims going up, and we lost all these jobs, right? People lost their jobs. And you know, you're hearing it from this national place that, man, we got our jobs back. We got our jobs back. But what you don't know is that every time there's a recession, it's very gendered. It's very related to your education. So the Great Recession, we lost a lot of jobs related to financial institutions. So you lost husbands and males losing their jobs, and that's why it had such an impact on households. COVID is about hospitality. It was about retail. These are positions that women are predominantly in. So we saw women lose their jobs. And so the jobs we're gaining are not predominantly for women. So you have to ask yourself, when we get these job growth, who's getting them? Women have not recovered from COVID at the same pace. This is a lot. I'm trying to think what was helpful to hold on to, but I think that is the local story right now, that COVID had a significant impact in our state, on a state that has not fully recovered from the Great Recession, a state where we continue to have almost 1 in 4 of our children living in some type of severe poverty or high poverty neighborhood. And so, you know, we're very much still in COVID, and then the jobs we have gained they're not the equivalent of the jobs we lost during COVID. Sorry.
So I don't want us to sit in awareness. Thank you for all of our panelists to tell us what the issues are. I want us to talk about action. I want us to move towards what can we do to realize equity within our own fields and areas of expertise. So I'll invite the panelists to talk about how can we move toward action, because we're all aware of the issues and we don't need to sit here in that. We need to move toward action. So I will start with Berletta.
It's so coincidental you're going to start with me, because I was going to jump on to something that, May? You talked about finances and the disproportionate impact on women. One of the ways in which I engage is to close the financial gap for others is by serving on boards. This is the women in leadership piece. I serve on the 1AZ Credit Union Board. 1AZ is the second largest credit union in Arizona. We have about 150,000 members, assets of about $3 billion. And there are a network of credit unions around the world, actually about 35,000 of them. In some cultures, the focus is on like microloans, you've heard of those. But credit unions in the United States were created to help bridge the financial gap. The challenge is there was a disproportionate impact because of racism that people of color, Black people in particular, were systemically excluded. But they still exist for the purpose of helping people achieve financial wellness. And the lack of financial wellness, equity, has long-term effects on people. So one thing we can do is to step into leadership, because if maybe not everyone in here is a member of a credit union, so A, you can join one. B, you can then serve on the board. There is, as you would imagine, the people who are in the room don't look like me. I'm the only person of color on my board. And for the last 2 years, I went to serve, and to serve where I told you my passions were, to open up the space from a DEI perspective. And I've been doing that for 2 years, and we have a whole program and initiative that includes awakening and education that you just spoke of. So I'm gonna, if I'm long-winded, just be like, this is enough. But I'm gonna segue a bit into the media piece, because it intersects, obviously, right? There's such a tremendous amount of messaging that we get that consistently impacts and influences, whether we are aware of it or not, kind of how we dress, how we feel about ourselves, what we eat, all of that. Maybe 30 years ago, I read a book called Psychological Chains and Images of Slavery by Naim, Akbar. If anyone is familiar with that book. But it opened my world. I hadn't really thought until that point about how the images that I was receiving was predisposing me to some degree to self-loathing at the time, because I wanted long flowing hair, and I used to put a towel on my head as a child and do this, which is not how my hair is, right? But the subtle image was that was beautiful, and what I had wasn't. The images that we consistently receive about, the economy and who's being impacted and who's in control, it's not typically us, but that doesn't mean that we can't be. It just means that there's an awakening that is incredibly important for us to really claim our place. It's not like they're going to necessarily invite us to the table. We have to really claim this. I don't see a person that looks like me. Maybe that's my space. Because from a media standpoint, we are ostracized typically from various roles, obviously, right? From the purpose of this documentary is actually to not focus on the poverty and the trauma, but to focus on what we made it mean and how we claimed our power in the face of all of those things. Because internally, most often, the people who end up, there's these correlation and relationships with folks who have significant trauma, who end up in prison and who end up with substance abuse issues or mental health issues. Not saying that that's a real thing that we need to address in society. And there are many of us who have those things happen and then also find the wisdom in it. And we seek to make changes within ourselves and within others. And those images are empowering images that are incredibly important, that we see someone who looks like us, whether it's a woman, whether it's a trans person, it doesn't matter what it is, that looks like us, that's shown in very positive ways. So those are some examples.
So I don't know if I mentioned this, my day job, I actually work in policy. So again, I'm taking the numbers, I'm taking the data, I'm looking at the economy, and then I'm using that to create allies, to educate legislators, because they are generalists, right? Many of them do not understand this, do not have the relationship with their stakeholders. And so it's so important, I think it's so, we have to talk about normalizing money, not just our personal finance, but also our state finances and our economy. Like I mentioned before, we are the economy. You guys are the workforce. You are the skilled labor. You are the ones who actually attract businesses here. It's not our politicians or our legislators. And so one of the things that I think is so important is, anyone can do this. You can set up a meeting with your legislator and just tell them your story. How have you fared during COVID? What are some things you're noticing? And I think the other part is reminding everyone that you're taxpayers, that the government and the lobbyists, lawyers, legislators work for you. They're here to represent you. And so I think part of it is like getting educated about what's really going on in the economy, personalizing, localizing it. And I think the other part is that the piece that is really promising here in Arizona, I think the more people understand that it's $22 an hour for a family of 4. So then if you're a single person, you have 3 children, $44 is what you need to make an hour. Getting informed about that, learning that, and then also recognizing that Arizona is changing. Our dynamics are changing. We continue to see local initiatives and pass new, recognizing that we don't have a living wage, and they're passing the ballot at these high rates. As you know, Tucson passed their minimum wage at 65%. That was the highest we've seen in the last 2 decades, right? And so you're starting to see there's this relationship where people are recognizing, like, I do not have enough to live off, right? This $50,000 I've been making for the last 5 years can't get me anywhere. So I think I'm hoping that, what I'm trying to say is that, there's all these advocacy organizations. We're one of them. YWCA, I'm sure, has a lobbying day or has relationships with them, but there's ways to get plugged in. But I think the most important is people need to hear your story. Whether you're struggling or not, people need to know, how has money changed for you, right? We all know how much it looks different when we go and buy groceries today. I usually spend $75. I now spend $150, right? We're seeing it in our pockets. So hopefully that's kind of what you were asking about. It's about advocacy and remembering they work for you.
You're gonna be my new best friend. Hi. So yeah, I think the same sentiment. I think is organize, right? Whether you're a mom at home, you're organizing conversations, you're organizing values, you're organizing norms. For too long, we've allowed, every day I'm talking to my grandma and my mom, like, y'all need to talk to your brothers. He's still a perv. I'm sorry, I'm gonna bring it there. I do that. We have to organize conversations whether we like it or not. And sometimes we have to push on the femme people, on the women that still uplift patriarchy every day. And so if you're at home, organize your home to be a home that's just, that's talking, that's supporting one another, that's talking about how do we protect one another, right? Organize at your job. If your job or your place of work or your employers are racist, you don't have to be everyone's friend. We're at the moment where we have to polarize people. And even if they're your blood, I'm sorry, sir. No, I'm not gonna, share food with you, basically is where we have to go to. And it's very tough because these are our family members. But right now I'm having conversations with my mother. She wants to go live with my uncle who dates women my age. And I'm gonna talk to her and I'm gonna be like, hey, I don't like that. And that's gross. And you need to talk to him and not laugh when he says that he wants another family, right? And so I guess I'm saying, in every aspect of your life, you have to organize conversations. You have to talk about things that haven't been spoken about. We here and we're talking about lobbying and policy and all that. We're asking you to talk about this at the legislature, actually, because laws are being made about you, for you, without you, right? And we're not talking about any of the issues, right? Right now, one of the other things that I never shared about my identity is my immigration status. Right? Because why? We're like this idea that can never happen, but the US needs us, right? We are that labor force. So you got businesses, pay people livable wages. You can do that. I have uncles who own restaurants, won't pay $15 an hour. I see them when I see them, but I have conversations around, I don't like that. And if you exploit people, right? I don't like that. And at the end of the day, like my uncles, my tios, whatever, they're not paying my bills either. You feel me? So I think it's a moment. I guess I'm not saying like go fight with all your family, but I think I am. I think I am, because then your family becomes the cops. Your family becomes that person that's fighting, protesting for you not to get an abortion, but you got one, but you didn't talk about it. You know what I'm saying? So I think it's about organizing, shifting power, to in places that we're at. I'm luckily one of the people that was able to use their stimulus check, and I'm an immigrant. I am fighting deportation, right? A reproductive justice issue is about being able to, create the families that we want to create, right? In the safe environments that we want to. I had my last 2 abortions under a deportation case, in a deportation proceeding, right? Where people would still tell me you should still have that baby. Why? Then you could take the baby away, right? And then you can incarcerate me indefinitely, because immigrants right now, it's mandatory detention, right? Because of laws, right? Because we're not there interrupting that. So now if I get arrested for whatever reason, I could be held indefinitely. But then you want me to start a family, right? Like all these things are things that are happening to everyday people. They're making choices for themselves. 6 out of 10 people that choose to have abortions are parents. Probably because of economic issues. Like, y'all just heard that? I can't afford that. I can't even go to a Beyonce concert. You know what I mean? I can't afford that. So it doesn't matter why people are making those decisions for their lives. What matters is that we need to respect people, right? And support their decisions, hear their decisions, and organize so we can have better internal circles. You don't got to be a protester or an activist at the legislature. You don't. But you're not organizing your inner circle. Those inner circle, those little people are growing up to be racist. They're growing up to go try and have businesses at UCLA, and they have restaurants, but they're going to barely pay $15 an hour. And they're just paying, they're literally expensing things so the taxes don't eat them, right? That's how wealthy people can be. But we're still crying about paying them $15 an hour. All of you have people that work probably in DOC and Department of Corrections, that have businesses that are still exploiting people. And I think I guess my point is we need to organize, and we need to talk, and we need to start shifting. And if you're still hanging around with people that are literally exploiting other people and causing harm in other people's life, that's not cool, dude. That's not cool. It isn't. And I just feel like, again, you don't have to be everybody's friend. You don't have to, just because people are your blood, people are toxic. People are still replicating cosas over and over again, right? Like still causing harm. People are not talking about things. And I think it's on you, for your self-care, for your collective community care, to start building with people that are like-minded, right? We always hear like, oh, well, it's a free country, Trump is cool. He did it good in the economy. First of all, what? Right? Like, no, actually the things that Trump is doing is inflicting violence everywhere. If your free speech is hateful, I'm sorry, we're not gonna support that, right? Like, we need self-determination, autonomy, dignity, and respect for everyone, no matter where you came from, no matter how long you've been in the US, right? None of this, and I think it's a moment where we have to just organize conversation, organize events. I'm organizing abortion showers virtually. Come, if you love somebody who's had an abortion, come to the abortion shower. They're every last Saturday, virtually, online. We give away a lot of stuff. We have a lot of political education. And not only that, but we're always continuously organizing. Black mama bailouts, right? Organizing conversations about who's incarcerated the most. Give me your money because I'm gonna send it to people that are bonding people out of jails, right? Because you shouldn't just be in jail because you can't pay $250 bond, $500 bond when you haven't even been convicted, right? So it's about really talking about this, because 1 in 4 people have people that are in the Department of Correction and the prison tentacles, right? They're either on probation, they're already in deportation proceedings, they're inside forever, and so forth. So I think it's just about us being active, more active. We gotta care, because the freedoms that you have right now are because people, Black resistance has fought. Everything that we have is because of Black people fighting for freedom. Straight up, we have born citizenship right now because of Black folks, right? And right now people talk to us about being anchor babies, right? I'm a legal permanent resident right now, and I don't wanna have a baby. I don't need this citizenship. That doesn't make me a family, right? So then you start really thinking about, how am I being racialized? And we have to push back. We have to create the communities that we want, and we have to start having conversations and building mutual support networks.
Sometimes we're looking for the answer to be right here when it's right here. There's a statement that I love, and I share with a lot of people. It's called, common sense is not common practice. Common sense is not common practice. So just getting back to that mindfulness of common sense, including women, people of color, people not of color, bringing everyone together. Getting back to just being mindful in your hiring practices, making sure you have an inclusive team of men, women, different diversities on that. Looking at your team as a whole and saying, okay, I can hire 100 people, making sure at least 50% are women, at least. And then there's diversity on your team within that hiring. Just getting back to those common sense things. Sometimes we lose that perspective and all of a sudden we hire everyone and we look up, 80% is white, 20% black. That's gonna cause, as we all know, resentment in the workforce. People look at that. People are intelligent. So just getting back to mindfulness in that area. As a parent, making sure the young ladies are educated. If you have a son of color or a daughter of color, making sure they're educated about things. I have a 21-year-old daughter, and I invited her here today. She's here with me. And I said, this will be a great conference for you to come see here and network with people. She just graduated from Grand Canyon University. And so doing little things like that. She'll learn some things from this conference. We'll talk about it on the way home. And just getting back to, again, that common sense, mindfulness piece of inclusion of everyone.
I don't know where the time went, but I am going to just give an opportunity if there's a burning question out in the audience that you wish to ask, but I'm not going to wait long. Okay. All right. So I do invite you to have continued conversations with the panelists. I do this little thing of like, what question does the panelist have to you? What question would you pose to the audience as a closing so that the conversation continues? And so I know I didn't prepare you guys for this because that's just me, but I'm going to ask the panelists to raise your question to the audience.
My one question would be, 5% of people make it happen. 5% of people. So this little section here, if you were to stand up, you would represent the 5% that will leave here today and do something from all this information. That's the statistic, 5%. Or this whole room could be 5%ers. So it's up to you. Even President Mitchell said it earlier, we need action. So what are you, my question to you is, what are you gonna do when you leave here today? Are you gonna be a 5%er?
Alejandra here. I would say, is it your values or is it stigma? And if it is your values, do you want to step on my bodily autonomy, or do you need to like have your values fulfilled by stepping on my neck?
Earlier today, Margaret Mitchell asked us to trust our knowing. She said, trust your knowing. I wrote that down, and beside it, I wrote intuition. So my question for you would be, what is your intuition, your knowing, calling you to do that you haven't done before, that would stretch you into maybe someone you don't think you are yet? And would you trust your knowing to allow yourself to do that thing, whatever that thing is?
You had me go last. Goodness, that was a very good question. I guess my call to you is to think about the way that you are participating in the economy, personally, at work, and think about if you are truly creating an inclusive economy where everyone gets lifted up with you, that it's not just about your pay raise, but how are you investing in the next generation? How are you investing in the folks leaving the economy? Start to think about that and figure out what role and path you play. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. And I'll bring up.
Thank you all. Thank you so much, panelists. Thank you, Dr. Nkrumah. I want
Can
to
I write my email and social media on here just so people can follow? Or
Sure.
email me if you ever want to work with me or do anything? Or are you going to send stuff?
Camera,
Okay,
yeah.
great.
Like
Thank
I
you.
think we got the handle for all y'all. Yeah. Because my call to action is a little bit about learning a little bit more about YWCA. I think maybe some things are not what you expected. I want to share, and I don't remember what order things are in, so I want to share a little bit about what we've been up to. I'm going to try to close this gap to get you out on time still. We've been focused on a lot of things Margaret said, a lot of things the community is saying, but how do we make action on racial equity in our organizations and in our communities? So we've been piloting a program that we're now calling Real Talk, Racial Equity Action and Learning, and is based on a theory of change that was developed at the YWCA USA and the Aspen Institute. So we've really taken a couple of teams and not just talked about the theory, but like Margaret said too, how do you make that happen and show up in your organization? Quick example, I've got some of our kitchen team here. When I came in 3.5 years ago, they were right at minimum. Minimum went up, we took them there. Last year, we bumped them to 14 an hour. This next round of budget, we're gonna push them to 15 an hour. Again, it's not 22, but it's that was math. Those were decisions we had to make as an organization to try to adjust the equity in our pay scales, right? We still have a lot of room to grow and to go, but it's the first step. Last part, May mentioned it. Some of us have been working from home, not spending money on gas or grass. Our friends from True Leave are here. That's kind of why I said that. But it changed the way we were spending money. And with my team that is working mostly from home, we're having conversations about equity right now, right? Should I be paying your mileage back because you don't have to drive to work every day? Should I be paying you now for some cell phone usage and internet usage because I need you to do that to stay connected with us, right? So those kinds of equity conversations, I'm not making it up by myself, but again, from this course, we'll learn the tools to how to have these conversations and to look at the barriers, the conditions, the opportunities, and the policies, and internally, they're internal company policies and procedures that keep equity from happening. It's heavy work in this. Right now, we are proposing to bring it to market late August. We'll be accepting applications for it. It's a 12-week, 6 courses over 12 weeks. I'm having trouble saying that right now. And we'll be having a wait list or a list of folks that are interested in being trained as facilitators. This is not your typical just jump in and do a gig, because there's some holding that needs to happen with the teams that are having these difficult conversations and making those internal goals about choosing equity in the company or the organization so that they can continue to move. What's the next slide? Oh, I thought I had go ahead. That one. So that's one part of our Real Talk. We're doing equity programs for a while now. They look differently, they show up differently. I love how Martha put this. There's individual work that can be done, and then there's group work that can be done, and it's all interconnected. So I won't go into all of these things. This is all going to be on our website. My call to action to you, then we're going to show the commercial. If you're not already getting our newsletter, which you probably are because you're here, please read the newsletter, make sure it's not going to your spam. Please find 5 people that need to subscribe to our newsletter and learn, and bring them to Stand Against Racism next time. We should have had a full house today. You are the 5%, right? We need those other folks. So let's show the commercial. I want to say thank you to everyone. I want to shout out to our board who was here, Dr. Nkrumah. God, I'm losing it. I'm not going to call you all by name because I'm now tired. But board, stand up real quick. I've got 3 or 4 board members here. Again, they're giving of their heart. Thank you. All right, commercial, and then thank you again so much. Please stay and mingle. If you want to hear a live stream, this is a special bonus. By this, and we give you a free set of knives. Margaret Mitchell is interviewing Dr. Bernadette King in another room. That is a bonus. So we will live stream it here if you have time to hang out a little bit more. If not, we understand you have a busy day. It'll be available for you to watch the rerun at some point. Okay, thank you.
Racism is alive, present, and it's pervasive.
Stereotypes aren't harmful because they're untrue. They're harmful because they're incomplete.
Students, right? Like, yes, we do have the acknowledgement. What does it mean? And where do we go from there?
I honestly appreciated seeing some of the struggle because this work is hard, and we're not trained how to think in this way every day. So just acknowledge that it's hard because we don't practice it, and when we practice it, we get better.
I think this week just really confirmed that this is a safe place to work and to explore and to learn.
These conversations of race and race equity are coming up after generations of ignoring our need to talk about it. When we avoid these necessary conversations, we support the belief that racism doesn't exist.